This is Dr. Charles Parker, and you're listening to Core Brain Journal. It's a place where I connect both fresh discoveries and interesting different perspectives from advanced mind science with the realities of real people and everyday life down on Main Street. Well, welcome, folks. Here we are, Dr. Charles Parker, one more time at Core Brain Journal, and we have a very interesting coach today who's going to talk about parenting, and parenting from the point of view of how do we actually help parents work with complex ADHD children. Diane Dempster, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
I'm so glad to be here. This is exciting.
So Diane is a certified professional coach. She's a speaker, educator, and co-founder of ImpactADHD.com. She works with parents of kids with ADHD or other complex issues to radically improve their personal and family life by gaining new skills, increasing their confidence, and learning to use coaching techniques in their parenting. We're going to tease apart that whole concept, Diane, of complex kids, because that'll be fun to talk about. I'm sure there are a number of our listeners are like, oh yeah, complex. So in addition, Diane received a master's degree from the University of Michigan School of Public Health and her coaching certification from the Institute of Professional Excellence in Coaching. She lives with her 2 children and is committed to living a conscious, balanced, and joy-filled life and helping other parents do the same doggone thing. Thanks again for joining us, Diane. So with that intro, tell us a little bit about yourself personally. What's going on in your life? Where are you right now? What are you kind of doing? And then we'll go into what we need to talk about.
Well, I am co-founder of Impact ADHD. You read that in my bio. Thank you for that. And Elaine Taylor-Klaus and I have been, I think we just celebrated our 5th anniversary of our group program at least, but we've been doing this for 6 years now. And our work is really parent training and coaching. And what we found when I kind of adventured into this world of coaching and this world of ADHD back in about 2010 and realized that the opportunity, the gap in supporting this audience is really, what do you do to help the parents? There's lots of resources about what to do for the kids or as adults with ADHD. There's lots of great books and resources, but we felt like there was really this kind of opportunity to support parents in a very different way. And I felt it personally when my son was first diagnosed. He was about in 3rd grade, and I'm a type A, get it done, working mom at the time, right? And I was like, I love my kid, but I just could not quite understand how it was working in his brain. And I wanted to be supportive, but I could tell that the things that I was doing were just not working the way that I wanted to. And I was yelling a lot more than I wanted to and frustrated more than I wanted to be doing. And it was a very difficult situation to be in as a parent. And what I found was that at about the same time, I went back and got my coaching certification. And a lot of the tools that I learned as a coach, you bring back into your everyday life, because a lot of it is just really good communication skills. And so when I changed my mode of communicating with my family, it really kind of changed the whole dynamic. And I found myself a lot less stressed. I found myself, engaging with my kids in a different way. And it really did help my kids to engage with me in a different way, and ultimately to, lower the stress in our house and help them to be more successful in school, is what I like to say.
Fantastic. Now let me ask you this. Run the tape back a little bit, because first of all, I want to hit the complexity idea a little more, because your children may or may not have been complex, but I want to know how you and Elaine define complexity, because others listening may say, well, my kid's a regular kid, but he has problems. How does all that work for you?
Now, that's a really good question, because, when we first started on this adventure, we were focused specifically on ADHD. I mean, both between our 2 families, we had 6 kids with diagnoses. Well, not all of them were officially diagnosed, but 6 kids that we knew were suspected for ADHD. And they had all kinds of other stuff. They had learning, LD, they had dyslexia, they have anxiety. I mean, all of these other things, and they do contribute to the challenges that they have, kind of being successful either in school or in life, or just kind of interacting as a family member. And as we developed our programming, and we came up with, we've developed really as a model of parenting, and it's a parent management system that we've created. And we know that it's good parenting. It doesn't just work for kids with ADHD. It works for parents no matter what their kids are like. And we know that there's a lot of parents out there whose kids are not officially diagnosed. They don't want, they don't have a label, or they don't know for sure what the label is, or the label is bigger than just one particular diagnosis. And so we started using this word complex because it really resonates with a different and a broader audience than just simply saying, my kid has ADHD, my kid has ADD, my kid has anxiety, whatever these kind of labels are. And it helps you to stay away from the label part of it, because it's really less about that and more about a great way of parenting that really connects with kids that don't quite fit the mold.
Well, to be completely transparent, this conversation is very similar to one that you, Diane, and Elaine and I have had at ACOA meetings in the past. I mean, I know both of you folks very well professionally from presentations at ACO, and that's the ADHD Coaches Organization, and we met there a long time ago. And what I was really impressed about is what we're talking about right now is, in fact, getting away from the labels and looking at the underlying, and in fact, complexity really says there are more variables than just a label.
Right.
And what you're going to do is then weave the process together in some constructive way, as opposed to this is our rote, lockstep, knock it out, here's what we do.
Well, no, I think that's a great way to say it, because what we've found is that it's not a solution, it's an approach. And there's a slight difference there, because a lot of people are like, well, I've got this kid, tell me what to do. And it's really not that easy. And I don't mean, there are some parts of it that are about just changing a few things and it makes a difference. But for the most part, it's really about just even the way you look at the situation, the way that you interact with your kids, the way that you kind of handle yourself when you notice. I was talking about the fact that I was overwhelmed and frustrated more than I want to. Part of it is about how do you handle yourself and the dynamic between you and your kids. And it's really, so it's more, we talk about creating a toolbox for yourself as a parent, right? So one thing about what we know about ADHD particularly, and the same thing for all of these complex kids, is that if there's nothing else that's consistent, it's the inconsistency. So one thing works one day, and then the next day, all of a sudden, it doesn't work again. And so part of this is just finding a way to be with the situation or handle the situation with your kids that allows you to be more flexible, more curious, more dynamic, because it's not just, oh, my kid has insulin, I need to make sure, or my kid has diabetes, I need to give him insulin. It's not that simple. It's much more complex.
Well, and I think the other thing that you two both bring to the table in the discussion is a sense of affirmative prognosis, in the sense that, if we do this, things can work out, as opposed to we're lost, we're hopeless, we're really not sure what to do. And what I remember talking about, and what comes through in your conversation right now, is an affirmation process where here's what works, here's how we can work it better, as opposed to here's the problem, how do we stomp it out?
Yeah, no, and I think that's an important distinction. And we talk about a strengths-based approach. And a lot of that in our world, you hear strengths-based approach, and it's about looking at your kid and identifying what is my child good at, celebrating that and focusing on positivity. But it's also about your approach just to the situation. If we focus in on, I'm a firm believer in the idea that if whatever you focus on grows. And so if you focus on what's not working and a problem and I've got to fix it, you're going to see more and more and more of that problem. If you focus on the solutions and you focus on what's working, you're going to learn so much from what's working that you can apply to other areas, and it really will help you to be more successful. It'll help your kids to be more successful, and it'll move the situation forward, instead of what happens to so many people. They get bogged down with this big thing. Oh, my kid's got this diagnosis, I don't know what to do. They're talking back, they're yelling, they're, all of these things. They're not turning in their homework, whatever the problem of the day is. We get so focused on the problem of the day that we get stuck on fixing that problem, like you were saying, instead of saying, how do I really want to approach being a parent, and how can I be the kind of parent that my kid really needs to be able to accomplish the things that they want to accomplish and I want them to accomplish.
Well, you're also talking about growing together. I mean, growing as a parent while you're working with, not at, growing with your child. And that's a whole different way of thinking about it instead of I'm the authoritarian person who's supposed to know stuff and this kid is out of line and I've really got to put him in a box and get this stuff corrected because it's going to be embarrassing when the neighbors see him.
Well, and not only, but kids didn't come with a manual, right? So I wish that when you get married or when you just get old enough that you could have a kid, they don't hand you a manual and say, here's what you do when you have a kid. I mean, you learn from what your parents did, you learn from other models that you have, you read from books, I mean, all of these sorts of things. But if you've got a complex kid, chances are that those traditional methods, some of the authoritarian model even, don't work the same way. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but it's different quite frequently with these kids just because their brains are wired differently.
Well, my own opinion is I totally agree with you. I would take it a little further than that, as in most of the time they don't, because if you have a complex individual and you think that it's going to be just structure can be helpful. I agree with you on that. But the next level is how do you actually apply a structure in a considerate and thoughtful way in the context of that child's evolution. Yeah,
no, and I think that that's one of the things that we talk a lot about with the families we work with is that it's not enough to just do a structure. It's just, they say, oh, give me a system, give me a structure, that's all I need. And there's two pieces of that. One is that if you create that structure outside of the context of really understanding what's going on for your kid, what's going on for you, that structure is not likely going to be sustainable. So you're going to put a reward system in place, you're going to have some pretty chart, and it's going to work for about maybe a day, maybe not even that long. And so that's part of it, is you've got to put it into context of what's really going on in the family dynamic. The other piece of it is how to make it work. And I think that that's one of the reasons that Elaine and I don't just do parent training. We do parent training with parent coaching, because the training gives you the information you need. The coaching is what helps you make it sustainable. It's really kind of what makes it stick. We use that language.
Tease that apart a little more. That's a very good point. But let's talk about that difference, because some of our listeners are, what the heck is she talking about?
No, I think that's great. So you read a book and the book says you should put a token economy in place. That's a key word, right? So you're going to give your child a reward every time they do a thing that, like, every time they hang their towel up, you're going to give them a reward. Right, so I'm going to give my child, I don't know what's a common reward, an M&M every time that they hang up their towel in the bathroom.
Yeah, that word was token economy, folks.
Thank you. I talk fast.
No, that's.
But so what happens is that all of a sudden it's not working and you don't know why, and it's really about understanding what does it take to put something in place. What does it take to do it every day? About 50% of the parents we work with happen to have ADHD or a learning difference themselves. And so the idea of remembering something that I've committed to, or even if they're just an overwhelmed middle-aged single mom like I am, it's hard to remember all of those things that the books tell us to do. And so it's really about figuring out, how do I do this in a way that works for me and my family? And let me give you an example. So one of the things that we teach is something we call taking aim. And you know that for every family that has an ADHD kid or a complex kid, there's probably 17 challenges just in one day that they're dealing with. And if you try to tackle all those challenges at once, my kid won't get up in the morning, they don't remember to brush their teeth, they don't sit still in class, they forget their homework, whatever the 17 are, then it's going to be really difficult for you and for the kid to try to put any change in place. But if you say, for the next short period of time, we're going to focus just on how do we get out of the bed in the morning, so that we're at the bus stop in time. You're going to be more successful. Your kid's going to be more successful. There's going to be less confusion, less overwhelm, less stress. Once you've had some success, you can say, okay, this worked, this didn't. How do we adjust? How do we make it happen? And then you can take what you've learned from that and apply it to another situation and another situation.
Fantastic. So what you're doing is taking complexity and simplifying. You're taking some of the variables out and saying, look, we're going to take this complex situation and simplify it piece by piece and break it down.
Right.
And then what happens? We'll practice. So the coaching is really a practicing, not just an exercise, but it's how do you then modify your particular position if what you're doing isn't working as effectively as you would like it to.
Yeah. The other thing that's really important about the coach approach is the way that you interact and work with your child. So if you're a traditional authoritarian parent, the role is, I, parent, tell you, child, what to do. And then you do it or you don't do it, depending on the situation, right?
I've never heard that before.
Never. But it's the coach approach is more of an interactive sort of thing. So the goal here, if you're trying to get your child, let's go back to hanging up the towel. I mean, your goal short term might feel like I'm trying to get my child to remember to hang up their towel so that my bathroom doesn't look crazy and I'm not always picking up after them. But ultimately what you're trying to do is you're helping them to learn how to manage their brain well enough so that when they need to remember to pick up the groceries for their partner or to, get dog food or whatever the thing is that they need to do in their future, or do something for a job to be successful, or finish their assignments for college. I mean, what you're really trying to do is to help them learn how to teach their brain to remember things. And so if you just focus in on that towel, you're going to have a very different sort of solution than, wow, how do I help you to learn how your brain works?
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So you're actually helping them move away from that circumstance and gain some actual process distance so that they can actually process the, really from more derivative in a way. You're actually not just on the towel. You're looking at the whole process and hoping that they can learn from the process.
Right. And you're helping them to become more and more independent. So it's not just, cause and effect. I tell you to do it and you do it. Eventually you want them to look and see, oh, I have to pick up my towel without mom telling me to pick up the towel.
I mean, this is so much what's going on in psychopharmacology. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about my particular stick, but it is really true. That's what's going on in psychopharmacology is that a person has a label, a diagnosis, throw some meds at it, call it a day, and not deal with the complexity. And of course, what happens is treatment failure very often is the result. Yes, medicines work effectively a lot, but they don't work all the time. And when they don't work all the time, it's because you have a complexity. Some variable is being overlooked and not addressed effectively, which is what.
Well, and I think that there's a couple of things that come up as you're saying that. I mean, in our world is that the guidelines say it's not just enough to do medication. I mean, you need to do behavior management, and a key part of that is training the parent to understand how does the brain work differently, and what does the child need in terms of support. And I think that the other piece of it is that even if, let's use ADHD as an example. Medication is really designed to help the brain to focus. But if you've got an executive function challenge, if you have a hard time organizing, you're still going to have a hard time organizing whether you're on medication or not. You need to learn that skill of executive function and figuring out how your brain works and how to organize. Very,
very well said. Now, let me ask you this question. What are some of the impediments that you've seen? Give us a little bit of an example of perhaps a challenge that you faced in your work with others that you got into it, you were approaching it from this very excellent comprehensive perspective. It didn't work out, something happened, and you had a learning experience from that. Anything occurred to you on that?
Yeah, no, the thing that kind of comes up for me, and I was telling this a little bit about my story, is that it's just this whole, what do you do when you get frustrated and overwhelmed as a parent? Because this happens all the time. I would tell you that's probably the number one concern I hear from parents is they come to me and they're like, I'm yelling at my child more than I want to, and I'm frustrated and I don't know how to handle it. I don't know what else will work. And so for me, what I realized is that by getting emotionally intense myself or getting triggered or getting frustrated, I wasn't solving the problem. I was just yelling at my kids more than I wanted to. And I was interested. I was talking to a client the other day, and it was a fairly new client, and the dad actually was yelling more than the mom would prefer. And so we were having this conversation about the yelling, and he said, well, I yell because it works. And it was like he didn't have anything else to do besides yelling, and sometimes yelling does work. But we also know that it stresses you out, it stresses the kid out, it stresses, in this instance, the spouse out. And so, the aha is, if I can stay calm and not get upset and not get frustrated and not get overwhelmed, I'm more able to problem solve. And I think that that's the thing that my clients hear over and over again that I learned myself, is that if I can avoid that moment of, oh my gosh, this is so crazy making that I'm going to lose my cool and either just go, fine, I'm throwing my hands up in the air, or how dare you, and start, kind of getting angry and frustrated, it's going to really change the dynamic in the family. And it helps as you can imagine, one of the key parts of success for parenting is that relationship you have with your kid. And if you're yelling at your kid more than you want to, or you're not engaging with your kid as much as you want to, it absolutely makes it more difficult to try to partner with your child to change some behaviors.
Yeah, they don't want to join with you. It's war. And
Yeah.
This is a great time to bring up this segue. Thank you very much, Diane, for bringing in this PDF. I mean, the title of the PDF that Diane is sharing with us is Top 10 Tips for Calm and Confident Parenting. So if this is going by a little too fast and you want to think about it a little bit more, it'll be at corebrainjournal.com/055 download. All one 055 download all together, no spaces. Thanks for sharing that, Diane. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm happy to. I think it's a great tool, and hopefully it'll give folks some good ideas.
So what would you say would be one of the more affirmative things that you've seen happen with a client that you've worked with, where you came in, offered these insights, and began to see some constructive changes? Run a little videotape on that one, if you will, please.
Yeah, so I think that the example I would give is a mom who was just really at the point of frustration where she could tell that it was getting in the way, and her child had kind of it was kind of going through the motions, was having a really difficult time in school, and the two of them are kind of button heads constantly, right? So mom would say, "Why didn't you do this?" or remind them to do that, and the kid would be like, "Yeah, mom, whatever," and they ended up kind of at a stalemate. And what we focused in on was really kind of two things. One is managing the frustration and her triggers so that she wasn't getting so frustrated, but she was staying engaged, and then rebuilding the relationship, because that's one of the core foundations of what we teach is, positivity and relationship come first, and it's through the relationship that you have with your child that you're able to make the changes.
It's so funny. I'm sitting here because I'm looking at my show notes. Thank you so much, but I plugged the wrong PDF. You had told me that you had this other one that you wanted, the Parenting Under Pressure.
No, that's the right PDF.
That is the same one. Great.
No, Parenting Under Pressure was the name of was the title of what we were going to talk about. So it's fine. I think we're doing great.
Solid. Good. I was worried I'd blown it on that. So what happened is you can see in reality and you can do this virtually with people. This isn't something that they have to be in your office to do.
No, actually, all of our clients, we have clients on 6 continents, but we do it via phone, we do it via Skype. But this isn't something you have to drive to. And I think the other thing is that we have a lot of free resources on our website as well. So if parents want great tips and ideas, going to impactadhd.com is a great place to do that. But then also to look at some of our programs, our parent training and coaching programs as well.
Fantastic. Now let me ask you this. What would you see would be the newer directions that you and Elaine are going in that could be constructive and affirmative and positively developmental for people who are listening?
Yeah, I think that part of what we're trying to focus in on is helping parents get clear on what they need in order to be successful. I think that there's a great article that came out this summer from the CDC talking about behavior management and parent training. And I think that there's this kind of, parents don't know what they need, right? They don't know, I need something, but I don't even know what that is. I can't tell you how many times I've had that conversation with a parent on the phone. They're like, I need help, but I have no idea what that is.
So true.
And so part of what we're really focused on right now is kind of educating the world and helping people know, it's like, what are the things that are helpful to parents? What is it that parents need to know to be more to help their kids to be more successful? And I think that the big part of that is the empowerment to know that you as a parent can make a difference. I think a lot of times we think, I've got to hire a tutor to help my kid, or I've got to get this for my kid. And we kind of pile resources and focus on our kids. The reality is, what we've found in our research is that by helping the parents and making investment in supporting the parents, that's really what makes a more sustainable and a more positive change. You know your kids better than anybody else does, and you're there. in a different way than even a teacher or a tutor or someone who's coming in from the outside to work with your child.
Well, you're helping the parent become a professional themselves. And they then have the internal structure to really understand the implications of what they're doing in a more realistic way and not so impulsive way themselves.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I would add to that, Chuck, is that we're helping parents to become more confident. And I think that that's the piece of it, is that if you feel like you have no idea what you're doing to help your kid, which is what a lot of us feel like, then you're going to be swatting at flies, which is what a lot of people end up doing. But if you feel like, okay, bring it on, I can handle this. I know I'm a resourceful parent. I know what my approach is. I know that my approach will work. The situation may change from day to day. And the reality is, if you've got a fourth grader who's got ADHD, when he gets to sixth grade, things are going to change. When he gets to ninth grade, things are going to change. And when he gets out of high school, things are going to change. And it's about knowing how to handle the situation rather than, okay, when this happens, this is what I do.
Yeah, knowing the process helps individuals deal with the changing reality at every developmental level, because the process really doesn't change.
Right.
It's the process has the integrity, the continuity that will then help everybody remain stable, because, hey, this is the process we use in this kind of circumstance without, okay, now we're going to have a different reaction to whatever. And I think what I see happen, and I appreciate your comment on this, is when people get too focused on the psychology. Well, this happened and that happened, so, it isn't an Oedipus complex situation, but there probably was this and maybe a little bit of transference with that. I'm getting a little deep, but I see parents get way too over psychological. And
well, I think that the spin I would put on that is that parents do get kind of stuck on a diagnosis. I had one family that I worked with. It was kind of like we worked for months trying to come up with, an approach that would work and was sustainable. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, we have a new diagnosis. So, in their mind, it's like, okay, things have changed. Well, you still have the child that you had yesterday. There's no difference. It's not like suddenly you wake up today and, it's a completely different situation. And parents like they like the knowing of something, they like the idea of having a diagnosis. But the reality is that this is not something that you just say, okay, this is what's wrong, here's what you do about it, which is an unfortunate part of what goes on with the medical model in today's society.
That is so true. Long distance high five. You said that so well. So in closing, Diane, what would you like to share? Are there any particular, hey, here's something that I think would be constructive, something that folks may want to pay some attention to? We're going to have some books that you and Elaine have recommended in the show notes, but anything specific that you think you want to just sort of punctuate as we go out the door?
Well, I think the thing that I would say is that if things aren't going well at your house with your kid, or if your kid's having a hard time at school, to really kind of look at yourself and how you're handling it and how you feel about it. I mean, I think that for many of us, as I said, we're more frustrated than we'd like to be. We're dynamic and our relationships are getting strained because we're not handling the situations as well as we can. And here's the cool thing, Chuck, is that if you focus on yourself and make some simple behavior changes for yourself, it will absolutely change the dynamic in your family, which will better set you up for helping your child in the long run. Well
said. Fantastic. Too brief an interview, but hey, we're going to do it in a half an hour, and a half hour has passed us. So thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. It's been great, and I look forward to talking to you again one day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a good one. Thanks for listening to Core Brain Journal. We're working every day behind the scenes to bring you reports that connect research benches with those street trenches. Here we share the complexity of mind science because, as you know, details really do matter. One of the most pervasive, misunderstood challenges is how commonplace medications, like those written for ADHD, are used so regularly without clear guidelines. If you think you'd like more specifics, take a minute to download my 2-page PDF packed with video links and references on the absolute essentials of How to Start ADHD Medications. They're easily available at corebrainjournal.com/start. Thanks for listening. Do connect and stay tuned. Together we can make a difference.